All right, let's go ahead and get started. Got a whole lot of stuff for you today, so I'm going to be breezing through it pretty fast and want to make sure we have enough time to cover as much as I can. My name is Mark Reeder. I've been at Tableau for over 12 years now. I've done this session 10 times, but every year I change it. These are tips to becoming a Tableau Jedi. So I'll explain a little bit about what a Jedi is. We'll run through a bunch of examples. Some of them are really tiny. Some of them are kind of complex and difficult. The great news is that this session is being recorded, so you can watch it later at your leisure if you want to repeat any of these things. Also, the workbook is going to be published along with that video. So you'll have my actual work with everything completed in it as well. All right? Before we jump into that, though, I'm supposed to remind you that this session is being repeated on Thursday. So even though it's being recorded, if you want to get that one nugget one more time, you're welcome to come back and watch this again. All right? It's in a different room, though, so beware of that. Okay, so let's dive right in with what is a Tableau Jedi. And I think there's three things that you must be a master of to be a Jedi. One is obviously the visualization, but what does that mean? To me, if you're a master of mark types and layout, then you're a master of visualization. Now, you might still not be building best practice or beautiful things, right? But you can be able to get your point across using advanced layouts and mark types. Understanding the data, specifically the level of detail in the data, and how to manipulate that using level of detail expressions, table calcs, aggregations, all kinds of exciting things. So we'll have some examples of those in here today as well. And finally, if you're a Jedi, you have to share your insights. You have to share things and make people want to come and engage with the stuff that you're building. So with that, you need to make great interactive content for people to want to click on and consume and use. All right, so those are kind of my three skills that must be mastered, and we'll run through a bunch of different examples today. I've structured it a little bit so that there's kind of an easy example and then a hard example, and then you can do an easy one. So if you're getting a little bogged down with one of the examples, just bear with me. It'll only last for like 5 or 10 minutes of pain, and then we'll come back to something a little bit easier, right? If you don't like the easy ones, same thing. Just hang on. It'll get more complex in a moment. So with that, let's get out of our little presentation mode here. And boom. Right, and go into our, well, first of all, this is my first Jedi trip. I always like to have something quick and easy, so even if you're disgusted after this, you come away with something fun. How many people know about these little buttons down here, right? This little guy shows little thumbnails of everything, so you can visually see your work and find the sheet that you want to go to. And this other one, it's one of my favorite hidden things. This allows you to like grab onto a bunch of sheets all at once and drag and drop them to another place. I'm not going to actually do that because that would ruin the rest of the flow of my presentation. But this is a great way to do some bulk manipulations. You can rename all your sheets here and do fantastic stuff. So we call this the sheet sorter view. It's just one of these little buttons down at the bottom. All right? And now we need to go back just to the tabs so I have more screen real estate. And a little bit of a scheduling issue. I think you're going to see this feature later on today, but some of you may have already used it. This is called Viz in Tooltip. We've shown it at our keynotes a couple of times, and it is now in beta. It's part of the version 10.5 beta. So I'm not going to teach you all the intricacies. I'm going to try and give you a couple of tips. So when you get that beta and start using it, you can build some good high-performance workbooks. All right, so first of all, let's do it. I just have this simple, I'm using all sample data here, by the way, so that you can leverage this and I don't know, share it however you see fit. So I just have a bar chart showing the birth rates in all the countries in the world. Right? So I'll add a tooltip here just by inserting a sheet. I've cleverly named it so it's at the top of my list, and we say OK, right? And that's it. Now we have a tooltip, so when I hover over these, right, I get a nice little trend. You'll see that Tableau is warning us down at the bottom. I can't move the mouse down there, but at the bottom it says view is too large to show. This is a common thing that you'll see all the time. I would advise you not to make the tooltip bigger by default, but rather go to the tooltip sheet and simply set it as fit width or fit height or entire view or whatever it is, and then that magically will scale it for us. See? Now it is all fixed. So that's the first little tip. The second thing is you may notice that this viz looks kind of ugly, right? There's tons of different lines on it. I would encourage you to do that because this means that if we run this viz, we'll have all of the data so that when we look at every single tooltip, we won't have to run any more queries in order to get the data. And in fact, it's really important that you try and match everything about the viz in order to make that work. So for example, here, this is color-coded by region, but region isn't on my tooltip sheet, right? So we're going to be running a query right now every time I mouse over because I don't have region in my result set for that tooltip. So there's two ways to fix it. One is to change the fields that are being used in the filter on the tooltip, which is pretty straightforward. Or I prefer just to get this to match the colors over here and everything, makes it a little more consistent. So I'll just add that, and now we're ready to go. But this brings up another question for a lot of people. Well, this works great in the demo because I clicked on the tooltip sheet, right? We ran that query for everything. We get that back. And then we can easily filter that just in our cache in order to get the results. But what happens if I'm on a dashboard, right? And I send somebody to a link to this dashboard. They come in, they run the sheet, but they haven't run that tooltip sheet yet. So now every time that they mouse over, we're going to be sending a query so that we can get that result there, right? If your data is fast, which this is, that's no big problem. If it's slower, right, it takes a little bit of time, the users might be pausing for a little bit in order to get that to catch up. So what do? There's a fun little trick. We just take our little tooltip sheet. I'm going to drag it just to some spot on my dashboard that I'm not too concerned with. Just going to make a little floating guy over here, right? And this is new in 10.5 as well. We can size things really small. So I can just make it into this kind of non-existent, you can even, usually it completely disappears. Not even a little artifact down there. Right, so now I have this little hidden sheet. I know it's there because it shows up as checked off on my list over here. But now when somebody runs this dashboard, we're not only going to run the query for the visualization that's there, but also for that little base sheet. And so we'll have that all in the cache and ready to run. And they'll have much, much better performance when they're mousing over all the different marks to see the tooltip. Right? So that's the first little bit about Viz and Tooltip. I hope you guys love this feature. Tableau does a lot of things automatically for you with it. But there's some things that you could do with formatting even better. So I don't know if you saw, like the legend automatically was stripped out. Some of the sizing of things changed. It's pretty nice to make it seamless for you. And it also gives us an opportunity to engage people more in visualization. Right? So we have a crosstab, very useful display of data, but sometimes it's overused. Right? There could be better ways to show this data, but sometimes this is the request. This is how people might prefer to see it. And hopefully a lot of you, whoops, clicked on the wrong thing there. Hopefully a lot of you have started doing things like maybe coloring it a little bit and filling in the background, just changing the mark type a little bit there. So we call this a highlight table. You can highlight some exceptions or other things in there. That's a good way to get introduced to visualizations. But also now you can just put a viz in the tooltip. So when they look at that, they get some extra detail. They see the trend of that particular thing over time, and hopefully they want to engage more with the visualization. Now, this is nice. I just built a simple viz and dropped it in there. But you can see the formatting of the date axis isn't so good. Sometimes, because the viz is so small, you might want to go and adjust things a little bit. Right? I just have a couple of letters with periods next to them. That's not super useful. Right? So let's go and fix that real quick. Here's my base sheet. Again, I have it bigger than what I want in the tooltip itself. This has all of the years and all of the categories and subcategories, just so it can be cached. But let's go ahead and format this month field. And I'm going to pick this wonderful capability called first letter, right? So if you use that, notice how it changed the axis at the bottom so that we just have the first letter of the month. Right? And I have this set to fit to the entire view, again, so it tries to adapt to the tooltip very nicely. So now when I mouse over things, I get that extra little bit of context, right, that allows me to see all of the names of the months, right, just with the first letter. So that's a fun little formatting trick for dates. All right, so we're doing pretty well. Sorry about the little sniffle there. Next, this is the more complex example, densification. All right? This is something that Tableau typically does automatically, and there's a couple of cases where you can exploit this to solve all kinds of interesting data problems. All right, so I'm going to explain densification and why it exists to begin with, and then we'll look how to exploit it so that we can do some more interesting things. So right now I just have a simple viz, right, showing some sales over time. And I want to do a table calculation to see the running total of sales. Right, so I'm just going to do that quick little table calculation, and boom. And although this is like a technically correct display of the data, it's not what we would want to see. For example, in this particular period, we didn't have any sales. And over here, we didn't have any sales for some of the regions. But I would still expect the running total to continue through those periods, right? Because the total that we had sold all before there should still be represented in that particular area. But there is no actual data there. There is no result set that we got from the database. We call it a tuple, or a tuple, if you like that. There's no row of data for us to plot. So Tableau will fabricate these extra rows of data for us so that we have information to plot. And in fact, Tableau usually does that by default. I've just turned it off so I could show you how to get it on when we don't turn it on for you. And you just go on date fields. You have this option to show the missing values. And so you can just click on that, and boom. Tableau fills in all those missing records, all the missing colors, and shows us a plot that we might expect. Okay, so that's dates. We do that with all the different date levels, fill in those missing values for you. Okay, the other time that Tableau will do this is with bins. And again, we do this by default, but I turned it off so I could show it to you. And so here we have things. Let me just make this bigger. I guess I didn't do my tech check properly here. So you can see that we're missing some values. The bins are supposed to be at 1,000, but we're missing the 5,000 and 6,000 bin, right? We're missing the 7,000 bin up there. So it's kind of a little bit of a deceptive display of the data. So when you use bins in Tableau, we also have this option to show missing values. And then we'll put in those blank or empty things. So this one's a little bit different, right? So instead of creating new marks, right, here we're just creating new labels for you. But it's still the same type of concept. All right, so these are two things that Tableau does to create data for us. Now, why might I want to create some extra data? Well, there's lots of advanced displays that people want to build, like Sankey diagrams, for example. I'm going to do one with a smooth line that connects through some different points. A lot of geographic data. Sometimes you'll want to be able to create arcs or points from one point to another point, but they're structured the wrong way. There's all kinds of things that it's useful to have more rows of data. And I see people either duplicating their data lots of times to create these extra rows, or joining in a big file that has thousands of things that join in certain ways, or doing cross products. But no, we can let Tableau create the data for us very easily. All right, so using these two features. So the example I'm going to build is based on a bump chart. So this bump chart just shows the rank of something as it changes over time. So here I did the sales rank. It changes over 4 years, right? It's not the most exciting viz, but wouldn't it be great if instead of just these straight lines everywhere, we had, I'm just going to change my little smoothing factor, if we had some lines that flowed nice and easy through everything. I just find this is a little bit easier to consume and to see some of those differences in magnitude, and I think it looks kind of pretty, right? So in this case, I'm using the exact same sample data, but I asked Tableau to generate 100 extra values between my 2 points of data that I had. Right? So this is all, we're not manipulating the raw data in any way. We're just telling Tableau to densify it for us. So let's go ahead and build this real quick. Now, some of the calculations, I'm not going to type them out because it gets a little bit too complex. But I'll show you some of the techniques that work here. So the first thing is I need to create a rank. Right? And I've already created this because it's embedded in some other calculations as well. But I'll show you what that is. This is just using a simple, let me hide that, simple little table calculation. Rank, I did a unique rank in case there is a tie, and then rank the sum of sales. Right? Pretty easy. So that's my table calculation. We're just going to throw that out there on the sheet, sales rank, and we get one big point. Right? I need to tell the sales rank to compute across my subcategories so that I get the rank vertically for every column based on my subcategories, right? So there we have it. We have our rank of stuff. Now I need that rank to be calculated at multiple points in time. Now just for simplicity, I'm only going to do this for 2 points, but in the example in the workbook, it'll show you how to do it for any number of points that you might be interested in. Okay, so now if I do something like drag out my order date, that's not supposed to be open. There we go, order date, right? You can see I have my 2 years and I have 2 different ranks. Well, how do I get the rows to fill in? Now, I could just expand my date out and change it to months or something like that, but now I have a rank for every single month, right? Because I do actually have data points for every month and day behind my data. So I don't want Tableau to recalculate it for every single period. So I'm going to do something that is a little bit of a reverse trick, and so I won't use the obvious thing, which is the date field. Instead, I'm going to create a bin to make sure that I don't have data in these particular bins. And so I created a simple calculation here, which is my year of order date. Right? So that's just going to extract out for every row of data in that year, it's going to have the same value, right? Just the year number. And it also makes it an integer, which is really important because we like to bin numbers very well. Okay, so now I'll just create a bin, create bins, right? Figure out a size. In this case, I want 100 points of data, so I'll make the size of the bin 1/100th of a year, and click OK. And then just drag that onto my sheet. And once again, we have points at the beginning. Oops, we need to make this fit. There we go. Points at the beginning and the end, but no points in the middle. All right, this is great. I have all the labels. I just need to force Tableau to densify my data and repeat my sales value, my sales rank, all the way across the data. All right, so we're making progress. I'm going to change this to a line display, just to show you that it doesn't work, right? There's no magic thing that connects these together because I don't have any points in the middle to connect them together. So let's do that. I'm going to kind of step ahead and show you that we can easily plot something across all that data. This is going to be the type of curve that I use. It's called a sigmoid curve. There's lots of other types of functions that you might want to use. It's really not that complex, but it looks kind of complex. So I have some notes in here for you after all, but it's just 1 divided by this exponent, right, 10 to the whatever. And it's based on the index of where I am, right, and the overall size, meaning the number of points that I have. And so this allows us to interpolate between 0 and 1 with this wonderful, nice, smooth curve that people find looks really nice. Right? So here it is, down below, right? We've automatically filled all that in because there's a table calc working across all of these bins, right? You could obviously use different things in there if you wanted to. I like this one because it's automatic. You could fix the numbers if you want to. It might improve performance a little bit. But that's a sigmoid curve. The equations for those are all online, easy to find, different ways to adjust them, get different slopes if you want, all kinds of great stuff. And then I'm going to use this other function that I created, if I can show you it. That, again, maybe looks a little complex at first, but it's rather simple. It's using a lookup expression, which is a table calc that allows me to refer to any value in my data window. And the window can be defined by the dimensions that you have. We can set that later if we need to. But it allows me to look at any value in my data window. So in this case, the lookup function says find the first sales rank, and then add a little offset to that is the difference between the last, right, the final sales rank. I guess for you it's over on that side. The final sales rank, right, minus the first sales rank. So basically we're starting at a point, we know there's some offset that we need to get, and then we're multiplying that by that sigmoid function, so we get this nice smooth flow through everything along the way. Right, so again, rather simple when you understand the power of the detail that you have in your visualization. Okay, so we'll just drag that guy over there, my smooth line, and boom, we've got something pretty exciting. It automatically works. This is another thing, I kind of tricked you a little bit because the way that I added these fields to the sheet, and because I set them properly each time I added them, both of these fields are used inside this calculation. So when I add that final table calc in there, it defaults to using how the other calculations have already been preset for me. So I use this all the time when I have complex table calculations, because otherwise you're in this menu here, right, the edit table calculation, and you're like, well, which one is which, and how are they supposed to be set? And it can be hard to figure out which one is impacting your result in which way. Instead, I just lay out all the base components, make sure that they're set properly, and then you add the final one in there, and it's automatically set the way you want it. Okay? So that's a great little shortcut for building these functions. All right, so let's get rid of the ones that I don't want now. I don't have to keep them out there. The other one's set. We might just come in here and reverse the axis, maybe not include 0. We could probably set the tick marks so that they show things. And now I can easily see my rank across those 2 years and see where they're transitioning, what's changing place, et cetera. Okay? And again, in the initial example that I led into, I showed that this can work across multiple years as well. It's also pretty easy to replace the dimension that you have in there, which I like. So for example, if I wanted to do this across states and see the rank of states, right, I'll just replace that on the color. My table calc breaks because it was referring to the prior thing, and I just say, look at states instead. Oh, and of course it broke. It worked last time I did that. Bummer. Oh, I know why I did that. I'm sorry. Let me undo. I was too aggressive. I have to go into the edit table calculation and just change the sales rank to work across states. There we go. All right? And now if I change the order of these guys, we will change the colors very nicely. See? So pretty easy to adapt the base fields that are in here to any type of thing you might be using. Great. So that was the more complex one. There is more examples in there, again, in the workbook that were just too much to cover in the time we had today. So let's go back to a nice layout trick that I enjoy. How many people have built a dashboard, something like this, where you have a whole bunch of numbers at the top that are just showing you some high-level stats, and then you have more visualization below? Yeah, it's a very common thing. And I see some people making great attempts at this, some people making not so ideal attempts at this, and I want to show you what I think is the best way to approach this. All right? So the first one, which is what's up here, is people often build each one as a separate sheet. And they do that so that things like this don't need to happen. Right? I can come in here and maybe with a little gesture. Come on, pop up. Why won't you let me drag you? Well, this is one of the reasons why I don't think this is a good example, because sometimes the layout can be a pain in the butt. Oh, I think I set it to distribute evenly is what the thing is. So I need to get up to this. This is why you're not supposed to change things after you figure out how to do it, right? So then you can adjust the sizes by dragging, but every time you change one, right, the other one goes a little bit off, and then you try that. So you're just always fighting this battle of trying to get these things to lay out properly. It also has the downside that each one of these requires a query to the database. So even though we can do queries in parallel, this is going to put, I have 6 things there, right? So that's 6 queries to the database just to get those top-level numbers. So wouldn't it be better if we could use one sheet to do that? So a lot of people try that. And I've already, for the sake of time, just tried to pre-filter my measures to the same things. But a lot of people will do this, right? You use measure names, which is great. Put measure values on the text, and boom, we have one sheet with all of those numbers on it, right? Fantastic. Except, I've got too much space for birth rate, right? So I'm going to shrink that. No, I just shrank everything along the side, right? So when we use this columnar display, Tableau always makes all the columns the same size, right? So sometimes this is going to work great for you. If your measures, both the names and the values are similar in size, this is a great way to go. In fact, I mean, this one could easily be fixed just by changing this to display in billions instead of million, or instead of actual dollars. So this is a very valid technique that works in a lot of cases. But I'll show you that with just a simple change, I'll just drag those measure names over here to my text shelf just the same. Notice how Tableau lays that out for us automatically, right? We don't get the nice vertical bars between my different measures, but they're all different sizes right now. We automatically put them into nice columns in this layout, but each column can have its own unique size, right? It's also really fun because if I did want to change this to be a vertical display, it's not going to let me do it. I have to do it on the dashboard. I can get it to actually lay out vertically as well instead of horizontally. So let's see what that looks like on our dashboard. Just grab that measure names and we'll just drop it in there. Don't worry if it doesn't look quite right. Again, we can just tell Tableau to fit the width, and boom, it's laid out. If you want more space between these, it's actually really nice. You can just go in and edit the text shelf and put some extra spaces in between things. So that's pretty easy. And of course, a little bit of formatting would make it so that they look like better titles there. Right, so that one's quite easy. Instead of fit width, I'm going to take it back to standard, and I guess I'll use a little blank guy over here. Right? I just want to make it smaller and say fit height. See? And now we can put them as a list going down as well. I'm not certain why it stopped at that particular point. There we go. There's not enough space to get them all in there right now, but we can do vertical layouts very easily just by changing the size of the sheet. So using these text layouts can enable all kinds of interesting ways for Tableau to lay out the data for you. You can put as many different fields on there as you want. You can type in your own text if you want to. So I've seen people do this to create like a sentence of data. You know, our sales last week were going, and then they put in a field that says up or down based on what the data values are, right? Or put in the number. You know, our customer satisfaction increased by whatever percent the values are there. So there's some fun things that you can do with this type of text layout as well. Okay, so hopefully that helps you get better performing dashboards. It's a little bit easier for you as the author to lay things out often on these text layouts rather than building all the different sheets. You don't have to compromise the look and feel either. Okay, so that's a nice little dashboard layout. Trying to see if I'm going, oh, good. We're going at a great pace here. Hopefully you guys are keeping up. Okay, so here's an interaction that I really enjoy. And it's kind of revealed in the title. So I want to be able to drill when I click on something, right? So we're going to build that today. So instead of, right here I can drill, but now I drill down on everything, which can be a performance problem, right? It drilled down on all of the states to the counties. And I have to know that I can click there to go back up a level. Or I could hit undo, right? But sometimes we get feedback that that's challenging for some users. They get stuck in a place and they don't know how to get back. So I'd rather, if I click on one of these titles or one of these marks, to just keep Georgia, right, and drill down to show the counties for Georgia. And then make it really easy to get back as well. So we're going to use a whole bunch of different techniques here, all strung together, to convince Tableau to do this for us. So the first thing we need to do is create an action, right? Because I need to tell Tableau to do something when the user clicks. So I'm going to create an action. It's going to be a filter action. I'm going to give it a nice, clever name like drill. And just so other things don't break in my workbook, I'm going to tell this to only work on this particular drill field or sheet. Right? So it's going to go from this sheet to itself. Most people don't know that we can have actions that refer to them to their own sheet. Right? You don't have to send them someplace else. These self-referencing actions are useful like for drilling down a hierarchy. If you have a recursive hierarchy, you can set these up so you can just keep clicking and drill down the hierarchy as much as you want. Useful for little tricks like this as well. We're going to make it run on select. We'll go ahead and I won't explain why yet, but I need to leave the filter. Well, actually, I'll just go ahead and leave it as default. And then I need to make this run only when I'm on the state field. I would just want it to filter that. We're going to be adding some other fields. I don't want to break it along the way. Okay, so pretty basic setup. Let's see what it does. I click now, boom, right? I've just filtered down to the mark that I clicked on. So that's huge progress. If I click again, right, it goes back up, right? That's because I set it to not clear the selection, right, when the selection is cleared, right? So kind of fun. You can go back and forth real easy. So that's step one. Now we have an action that does something interesting on our sheet. But just keeping a single field isn't what we want. So we're going to create another calculation. And this one, I'm just going to call it like drill level or something. In this case, we're going to use a little if statement, and we're going to use a level of detail expression. Now, a lot of you might think you know the right expression to write in here, which is fantastic. I'm just going to default to the right one and then eventually explain to you why this is the correct one. So I'm going to do a fixed calculation, and hopefully it's the right one because I don't actually remember if this is the right one. And I'm going to do a count distinct of the states. All right, so if the count distinct of states equals 1, then we're going to show the county field, right, county, else we're going to show the state field. Whoops, there we go, and end. All right, the level of detail expressions, I'm not going to go over those in detail today, but what they allow us to do is to do a calculation that is at a different level of detail than our visualization is. So our typical aggregations take into account all the dimensions on the viz. This one I'm saying, just in my overall data set, count the number of states that I have. Right? Now, this is why most of you think it's wrong, because you're like, well, that's always going to be more than one, right? There's always more states in there. I'll show you how to fix that and why I had to use a fixed here in just a second. All right, so let's take that field, drop it out there, see what it does. Right? It looks correct right now. It's showing me state names, but I click and nothing exciting happens. Right? It didn't default to 1. Well, again, that's because there's still many states in my data set. So what I can do is take my action and add this to the context. So now that that fixed LOD expression is going to operate just on the data that matches my filter, right? So this is a great little way to manipulate level of detail expressions. A lot of you thought I should use an include or do a fixed at the state level or some other type of thing. I can't use an include or exclude expression because those are measures, right? And I wanted to display the actual dimension value. Right? Yeah, there's some other tricks we could do along the way, but I find that this one works the best. Okay, so just add the action to the context. Now when I click, boom, right? It drilled down and showed me good stuff. Right? I click again, and I get an unexpected error. Things could go poorly now. Thankfully that, well, we'll see. So very nice, right? I can click. Yeah, now it's done. Okay, that one worked. Yeah. So let's take our state. I'm just going to get it out of the way so it's on the detail, right? We'll try it again. There we go. This is what I was expecting to happen. Nothing, right? And the reason that nothing is happening right now, and it goes back to how we set up that action, because if I click on Florida right now, and then we change all the values to be the counties, Florida is no longer selected, right? So it's actually doing the action twice super fast. It's doing the action, finding that nothing's selected, and then reversing my action right away. It can be very confusing when you encounter this in practice because you're like, it's not working. But it's actually doing things twice every time I click. So that's a quick and easy thing to fix. Going back into my action, edit my little drill there, and instead of clearing the selection will show all values, we just say that it should leave the filter. All right, so now when I click, good, it drilled down. I click again, nothing happens. Well, I could tell the users to hit the undo button, right? That would help out. But it should be a little bit better. I want it to go back up when I click again. So we're going to trick Tableau here using a dual axis trick. Again, we'll just create a little calculation in here based on obesity rate. Create a calculated field there. We're going to call it tricky. So we're going to say, well, actually, let's go ahead and say OK on that. I forgot one other little tip that I was going to give you here. So I want to reuse this part of my expression, right? But I don't want to remember exactly what it was, or if I decide to change it, I want it to change several places. I need to use this in the next calculation. You can just highlight that, drag it over to the data window, right? And it creates that. So I can say one state. And now I have my sub-expression as a new field that I can reuse wherever I want. So this, you can drag and drop stuff onto the shelves if you want to. You can drag parts of it out. You can do all kinds of fun stuff. And so I love doing that just to make those sub-expressions very easily. All right, so now let's go back and edit our little tricky calculation. And so here we say if there's one state, then show the obesity rate, otherwise null. Well, actually, this is the reverse of what I want to do. I wanted to show you two little tips in here. One is that I love writing these simple expressions without the else clause, because Tableau will automatically add the else clause for me, and it'll put an else null in there for me. Right? So it's just a little shortcut that you can do. But this is reverse logic, right? So if there's one state, in this case, I actually want to show null. And if there's counties, then I want to show the obesity rate. Okay, so in order to fix this, my other trick that most people don't seem to find, it's hard to get to, if you want the opposite of a logical expression, you just put the word not in front of it. Okay, so if not one state, meaning multiple states, then show this obesity rate. Okay? Otherwise, there's going to be a null in there. So again, fun little shortcuts that you can do in your calculations to get things going. So let's add that guy in. We'll put it up there. Notice that it's null. Now I don't know how to get back. I usually do this the other way. But we'll continue on. This needs to be the average. And then we're going to say that this should be a dual axis. And then we're going to get rid of those extra colors that ended up on my color shelf. Tableau automatically adds that. So now I have a dual axis, so I basically have 2 marks behind each state right now, or I guess these are counties. So when I click on this mark, that's clearing my selection. Okay, this might be related to that error that we saw. Oh, there we go, that's right. Okay, let me explain that. I skipped this step, I apologize. So I took state, it was in the detail pane for the second one. I don't want it there because now there's still a state in each of these marks that I'm clicking on, and that keeps my action going, right? So if I take state out of the level of detail of the second measure, then it's not going to be available in the mark information when I click on it. There we go, now it's working. All right, so the level of detail trick is basically to say, when I drill down, don't display any information about the states, right? Let's get rid of that detail. And so there's basically little null records when I click on this for every single value. Okay, so there's actually like, oh, let's click again. So there's null states everywhere here, and you can see that over here because I have this little null indicator. You can get rid of that, by the way, by right-clicking and saying hide. We have this wonderful little interaction where I can click on any state that I want to. It drills down, shows me all the counties, and then if I just click anywhere again, it'll drill back up, and I can investigate the next state that I'm interested in. Right? So I use this bar chart because it is kind of an easy way to show and explain it. We had to create actions, right, that referred to the sheet itself. We put that action on the level of detail, on the context. We created a level of detail expression to count how many of a certain object were in the context. We wrote a couple of nice calculations to manipulate the display and use the dual axis trick so it looks like there's still marks when there aren't for some things, right? And now we have just like a fun little drill down. Of course, this one just drills down and then back up. I haven't figured out how to make it drill further. But this concept is very useful in a lot of places. For example, I have a map, and I want to drill down the details just for Texas. Boom, there's my details for Texas. Right? I click on something again, and oh, we're loading the map. We got some slow internet here, I guess. And we'll just wait maybe and see where it goes. So very useful on maps because you can click, it drills right in, comes back out, and you're able to see that. I think we might be hung, which is fine. This would be a good spot to try over since we had that error earlier. All right, well, we will just, maybe we're more hung than I thought. No, that's still working. All right, how are we going to do this? Because it won't launch a new Tableau for me, I think, while that one's still running. Yeah, we're going to have to force quit it. Oh, there it goes. It came back. But we're going to stop it anyway and try again. No, don't save, please. Okay, so yes, this is the beta. So it has worked great for me doing all this construction and rehearsals of things, but things always go crazy. All right. We are really going to get it now. Can I force quit from this menu? Oh, yeah, thank you. I always do it from the icon, but I don't have that right now. Yes, we really want to quit. Okay, perfect. Thank you for the assist. All right, Tableau 10.5. There we go. And now we are back up and running, and we're in a great spot to show you some other examples. All right, so I was clicking on a state to drill. You saw that once, so I'm not going to do it again because who knows what's going to happen. But you can also do some fun things on dashboards using this technique. So now instead of drilling to the sheet itself, I'm using one sheet as an interface to drill down on other sheets. So for example, if I come here and click on California, then the upper map is going to filter to California, right? Yeah, it's not liking my second clicks all of a sudden. And vice versa, you can make it so if you click on a state, it'll drill down to counties in the details below. And there was a fun little thing I wanted to show you there, is I actually made it so that the title changes from all states. It'll say showing however many counties from this particular state. So that's a fun thing. I think it might just be some sort of internet issue or something. I'm on Wi-Fi though, so I thought that would work. But we'll give it a second here again. All right, we won't, we'll give up. And quit that guy, and we'll just launch it and skip to the next example. All right, yep. Full screen once more. All right, yeah, we can get rid of you. Okay, so it should work very nicely for you, apparently, if you're on the internet. Okay, so all right, so we're back. Oh, this is supposed to be a smooth bump chart, but just pretend like it is. It doesn't really matter for this example. So the next thing is legends, okay? So here I have the default legend from Tableau, but I have a line chart, right? Wouldn't it be nice if there's a little line there, or maybe just a little circle would be fun for us to be able to build there. Tableau doesn't allow us to change the type of icon or the swatch that I use in my color legends. It's always the square, right, no matter what I'm doing. So can I build my own legend, right, that has the look and feel that I want? Of course, the answer is yes, because I'm up here asking the question. It's a little more complex than it should be, but it also allows us to set up some additional interactions, because then you can have, it's a sheet when we're done, and that sheet, when you click on it, it could filter one sheet and highlight a different sheet, right, or do a bunch of different types of things. So in fact, it kind of unlocks a whole bunch of more capabilities for us as well. Or with Viz in Tooltip, you could actually have a tooltip pop up on your legend, right, that tells you more information or shows you all kinds of great things. So I actually became a bigger fan of this after building a few of these examples than I thought I would. So we're going to start just by building a simple sheet with our subcategories, right? We're going to put subcategories also on color. We're going to tell it that it should be a circle, right? Now, a lot of people know tricks here, right? We might want to put subcategory also on the label and get that to lay out. But you see the problem here. Although this would work in some cases, I've set it to align to the right, which it goes fully right. I really wanted it just to be on the right side of the mark, and I haven't been able to convince it to do that, right? It either goes on the other side of the mark or on that side of the mark. Sometimes it'll be correct for some marks, but flipped for other ones, like if the word art is shorter and it'll think it'll fit on the other side. So you can't really put the text on the same sheet as the display of the legend mark itself. So I'm going to take that off. I am going to undo my manual sizing, so that's back in small. And then I'm simply just going to do one of the tricks we all use is just to not show the header over there. So now I have all my little values, and I will duplicate the sheet to create another, is that the right sheet? Yeah. To create a copy of this so that I can put my text on there. Now, I know all of you are really excited because I already taught you that you can come in here and choose text, and then Tableau will lay it out in very interesting ways. Right? I can say put that subcategory on the text, and then we're all happy. The problem, if you look at it really, look how big it is right now, how long that list is between those two. The problem is we use different layout algorithms for different mark types. So trying to get the size of this text layout to match the size of my circle layout legend is challenging, all right? It's possible, right? But you have to manipulate things, and I find it's much easier to just keep the circle mark, right? Put the text out there, which is fine, and then simply change the layout of the text to be on that side. Okay, so this is just, you click on the label, you change all the fonts or colors or all kinds of different things. In fact, I really like a capability we added recently. Oh, it's not there. Let me do it again. There it is. To match the mark color, right? So now you can have text, your labels that are on the end of lines or other things like that match the color of the mark. So I really like that one. I'm not going to do it right now, though. I'm just going to keep it as automatic. And then, of course, we have these extra dots there that we want to get rid of. So we're going to make them small by changing the size, and we're going to make them transparent by changing the color or the opacity to 0. So now we've just created a little set of labels that I can put out anywhere that I want. So we'll go back to my sheet, and we're going to get rid of that. I'm going to add a little horizontal layout container on the side here, so I can put my 2 legend sheets out there side by side. Right, there's one, there's the other, and then let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of our titles. If you want a title, you can either leave the titles on for both, or I just like to put another text field up on top so I can put the title in. I'm just going to hide the titles for both of these. And voila, right? We can shrink that as much as we want to get them next to each other. In fact, we can now, in the layout, we can get rid of all the borders if we want to. So outer padding, inner padding. Oh, I need to pick one of the zones. There we go. All right, so it has all this padding around it. I could just say make that 0 and get them perfectly knocked up against each other if I wanted to. This one looks like it has a scroll bar right now, which is changing my sizing a little bit. I don't know why it has a scroll bar. I think I changed the wrong thing there. All right, there we go. Make it small, get it over there. And then, I did it again. All right. And then, I don't know, they've always aligned for me before. Again, that's part of the joy of demos. Oh, I changed the padding, you're right. So I need to change that on this guy as well. Thank you. I must have done it in the wrong. This one, I actually want to keep some of the padding, so I'll change just some of them to 0, and then we'll be in good shape. So I left the lines on so you could see that they actually line up in good ways. Of course, you could format that to get rid of those upper and lower lines and do other things as well. But now we have a nice little legend that we've custom built. Again, part of the value is you have these tooltips, so you could put like a little histogram there to show the distribution of labels. You could have different interactions, so when you click on this, it filters or highlights or changes things. Lots of fun stuff that you can kind of collapse. You can make it work as your quick filter as well as your legend then. All kinds of great things. And of course, I started out saying, what about, I want it to look like a line. That's just a little more complex to build, but totally you can do the exact same thing. It keeps wanting to bring out our color legends, right? And just create your line and shrink it up, whatever you want, and get rid of that title. So any mark type that you want to be your little color swatch is now possible, using just some of this fun layout and some of the new spacing features in 10.5. Okay, so nice quick win there with the layouts. Let's go on to our next guy. Uh-oh, running out of time. I will skip this one and go on to the final one so that we can use that instead. So this is, again, a relatively simple one. I'll explain the other one. I have enough time to do that because the example is in the workbook that you'll be able to download. Here I have 2 vizzes on my dashboard, and they both have the same measure, but they're at different levels of detail. But they have different axes, so it's kind of hard to compare or to understand these. So this technique is to use a reference line and some level of detail calculations so that we can calculate the axis range of both of these from each other. And so the reference line will then make it so all the axes line up. Oh, I lost the mic. Okay, while you filter, you can have the choice of whether to have the axes change with a filter or be static. Change the filter as well. Okay, so then my final one, this is just a fun little thing that always frustrates me when I use people's top 10 vizzes. They'll show top 10 and maybe some other measures next to it. All right, so here I have the top 10 countries with internet usage. Notice that Iceland's up there, and Liechtenstein, and some fun things like that. And then I sort on birth rate, and I get, in this case, I get the same set of countries. Why is that? Is it the same set of countries? Yes, it is. It should not be the same set of countries. I've confused myself now. You would think that something besides Iceland, right, would be in the top 10 for birth rates, right? Population total, same thing. I sort on that. Where's China and India and Russia, all these other types of places that are big countries. So all this sorting is limited to what's in my top 10, right? So instead of using that top 10 filter on the country, I'm going to create my own little top 10 filter. And I don't know if I wanted, I'll just do it here. And we'll call it index, and we'll say that the index is less than 11. All right, so quick little calculation, drop it in there, index less than 11 is true. So now we're using table calculations to filter my data. I'll warn you, do this when you have a relatively small domain in your result set. So if you have a few thousand things, this is probably okay. If your country field has millions of things, this is not going to be the trick for you, okay? But for several thousand things, it works quite well. And so now when I click, since we have all of that data, we're going to sort it and then find the top 10 things in our index. And so the list of countries is going to change no matter what field I click on over here. So now you can see we have all kinds of different countries for the birth rates, a different set of countries for the population totals, et cetera. Right, so I just find this makes top 10 vises a whole lot more consumable for people because the measures change, or the countries change while you click on different measures. Right? So unfortunately, that's about it for today. We're pretty much out of time. I hope you've enjoyed some of these tricks and have a couple of things that are going to advance your journey to becoming a Tableau Jedi. I have to also remind you that there is a survey, there we go, that I'd love it if you completed and gave us some feedback on the session, and even I'd love it if you sent some of your own Jedi tricks to me as well. All right, thank you. Enjoy the rest of the conference.